Welcome to episode 483 of the Brainy Business, Understanding the Psychology of Why People Buy. In today's episode, I'm excited to introduce you to David Robson, author of The Laws of Connection. Ready? Let's get started.
You are listening to the Brainy Business Podcast, where we dig into the psychology of why people buy and help you incorporate behavioral economics into your business, making it more brain-friendly. Now here's your host, Melina Palmer.
Hello, everyone. My name is Melina Palmer, and I want to welcome you to the Brainy Business Podcast. Our lives are full of connections. Family members, friends, coworkers, frenemies, besties, and that person you nod to in the hall but don't actually know their name. Some are close, some are acquaintances, but connecting with others is key to being human. We're built on it. There's a reason solitary confinement is a form of punishment. Being a great connector with solid connections to others is key to success in life and business. And thankfully, my guest today, David Robson, has written a new book to help you do just that. David is an award-winning science writer specializing in the extremes of the human brain, body, and behavior. After graduating with a degree in mathematics from the University of Cambridge, he worked as a features editor at New Scientist for 5 years before moving to BBC Future, where he was a senior journalist for 5 years. His writing has also appeared in The Guardian, The Atlantic, Aeon Men's Health, and many other outlets. David has received awards from the Association of British Science Writers and the UK Medical Journalists Association for his writing on misinformation and risk communication during the COVID-19 pandemic. He also won Mental Health Story of the Year at the MJA Annual Awards and was a finalist for the Best British Science Journalist of the Year award from the ABSW. Today, we touch a bit on David's first two books, The Intelligence Trap and The Expectation Effect, how your mindset can transform your life. But as mentioned, we're focusing most of our conversation on his newest book, The Laws of Connection, The Scientific Secrets of Building a Strong Social Network, which came out in 2024. Really quickly, before we get into the conversation, I want to be sure you know that there are links in the show notes for my top related past episodes and books, ways to get in touch with David and myself, and more. It's all within the app you're listening to and at thebrainybusiness.com/483. Now let's jump right in. David Robson, welcome to the Brainy Business Podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yes, I'm so excited to be talking with you about connecting with people and having better relationships with everyone. For those who don't yet know you, before we jump into the book, can you share a little bit about yourself and the work that you do?
Sure. So I'm an award-winning science writer based in London, and I've written 3 books, The Intelligence Trap, The Expectation Effect, and most recently, The Laws of Connection.
Oh, well, I know we're going to talk about the laws of connection. Can you share a little bit, I guess, about this writing journey as, we were talking a little bit about this, before we started recording, but would love to hear about your process and your other books.
So I have a degree from Cambridge University, and that was in mathematics, specializing in medical statistics. And I'd always loved kind of literature, especially popular science, like understanding the brain, in particular, the, what makes us tick, what makes us motivated, how we make decisions, how we can improve all of those processes. And so when I moved into journalism, it was just a way of combining all of these passions. And I started out at New Scientist magazine, which is kind of like the British Scientific American. It's aimed at a popular audience, but it really does look at science in a very rigorous, accurate kind of way, and uses science as a lens to view lots of other cultural phenomena, politics, all of those things. And then I moved to the BBC before writing The Intelligence Trap, which asked why smart people make stupid decisions. And the kind of serious side of that was asking, well, what kinds of intelligence should we be cultivating? And The Expectation Effect looked at how we create self-fulfilling prophecies in our lives, and specifically how our beliefs can become reality through changes to our behavior, changes to our perception and changes to our physiology. So things like the placebo effect, but applied across the whole lifespan, not just in the kind of medical setting.
Fascinating. So how would you say, so the books, do they, in your mind, is there kind of this logical connection that goes through, I learned about the one that unlocked this other thing, or is it more like, I went all in on intelligence and now I'm going all in over here and like, let's talk about connection now. Like, how did you, I think everything is connected, right? But like they're less connected maybe on the surface than some other books and authors we have on the show.
Yeah, I mean, like scientists often say that research is me-search. So I think that was what drew me to each book, was because it was personally very important to me. I was answering some questions that I wanted to know for personal reasons, to understand myself. But I do think there is this kind of underlying theme to all of them. And I think that is that I'm really encouraging people to question their perceptions, to correct biases, to kind of look beneath the surface and to try to view their lives in a way that is maybe a little bit more objective. And, with the intelligence trap, I was, very much looking at the science of rationality there, how we can become more logical, more rational thinkers, wiser thinkers. But in the expectation effect, I was trying to build this case that often we have an overly negative view of ourselves and the world around us, and that this can kind of manifest in this negative self-fulfilling prophecy that's kind of limiting us and preventing us from reaching our potential. And then with the laws of connection, actually, we see something very similar with our relationships with other people, in that we often have overly negative expectations of how people are going to respond to us and our own capacity to build meaningful, authentic bonds. And by challenging those beliefs, we can create very quick and very profound transformations in our lives. It can, personally for me, researching the last book was the most transformative of all, because it really did help me to see that there was so much more social connection in my life than I realized. Often it was at arm's length, and I just needed to change my own perception. It was like getting a new pair of glasses and seeing the world in a new way, seeing my relationships in a new way.
Yeah, I love that. And I know you have reference from Nick Epley and from Vanessa Bonds through the book. They've both been on the show before, and big fan of their work as well. So as you, I guess, extend into this piece on connection, let's talk a little bit about I don't know if you want to jump right into what some of the laws are, or like we said, kind of where you got interested in looking into connection. What's your favorite way to start talking about this book?
Yeah, I mean, I can come at it through a number of angles. I guess, in my journalism, I had interviewed Nick and Vanessa. And what was immediately obvious to me was that they really practice what they preach. Like, they're such incredibly kind, generous, wise people. And so that made me kind of, sit up and realize that, this is research that I really want to incorporate into my own life. It's not something that I just want to write about for, the Guardian or the BBC and then forget about. Like, I really want to dig deep, find out what their secret is. But social connection had been something that has always been really important to me. I consider myself to be a shy extrovert, in that I really do get a lot of energy from being around other people. If I'm alone for a few hours even, I kind of feel like my head's going to explode, because I need to be not necessarily talking to other people, but I need their presence. I need to have some kind of interaction. But I'm a very shy person, and I was even, incredibly shy, to the point that it was very debilitating when I was a teenager. I really struggled even to kind of talk to, someone at the shop, to buy a CD. And yeah, I had very close friends at school, but it was always like making new connections that was the big anxiety for me. And I kind of overcame that, I guess, when I was doing, starting out on my journalism career. It's actually a great form of exposure therapy to have to interview, strangers. And it does teach you very quickly, actually, that people are often much nicer than you expect them to be. And that they'll respond to you much, in a much more generous way than you would expect, even if you kind of fluff up, even if you say the wrong thing. But yeah, when I came across that research that we spoke about, people like Nick and Vanessa and their work, that made me want to revisit this. And I really wanted to write the kind of book that I could have given to my 15 or 16-year-old self, and just accelerated this process of building social confidence. And, I learned so much that even though I, by that point, had considered myself to be to have kind of built those social muscles, I still found out so many surprising things that have changed the way that I react and interact with other people.
Yeah. Well, and so like we say with Vanessa, research of having to just go ask people for things, right? To, borrow a phone or, and you expect it's going to be, 1,000 people, like no one will ever do this thing. And you realize very quickly that that's wrong. But, so going into journalism, I guess, so, like you said, you have to just start cold calling people. And I guess, how long did it take for you to, did you just jump in, you like adopt a new persona and like say, I'm putting on my journalism person hat and I'm going to use the credence of the organization I'm reaching out on behalf of, or what was that sort of like?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think having the kind of context of journalism, the kind of explanation, the reason of kind of why you're calling someone definitely helps. So it was, in that way, it was quite a nice kind of playground for me to build these social skills, because, so it did feel like quite a safe space in that way. But, it was still terrifying the first time I did a telephone interview. But, very quickly, actually, I got very used to it. And all of my friends had known me during my shyest period, but super surprised by this. So, like, how have you suddenly been able to call these kind of world leading scientists when you really struggle in the past to talk to, like the mailman. But, it really chimes then with the research I discovered for the laws of connection that actually we can change our social perceptions and build our social confidence very quickly. So there's this lovely research by Gillian Sandstrom and a team of researchers who had asked people, just regular people, not especially shy, but certainly not especially confident or extrovert, to go on this scavenger hunt, as she called it, where they would just try to strike up new conversations with different people each day. And she gave them a list of goals. So it could have been talk to someone with a cute pet or amazing shoes or funky hair, someone who's an artist and is kind of practicing their craft in public. But what they found was that people really dreaded making those conversations before the start of the trial. Like they expected those interactions to be very awkward. But by, just 5 days later, less than a week later, they had already recalibrated their expectations. So they were already starting to look forward to those conversations rather than dreading them. And that was certainly my experience, with this journey, that you can very quickly correct some of your shyness just by going out there and practicing. And the problem is that often we just don't have the opportunity to do it enough. We tend to be quite avoidant of the things that scare us. And so even though each time we do it, it might be more pleasant than we expect, we forget that fact. And so the next time we do it, we're still just as terrified. And I think what was great about Gillian's experiment was that by encouraging people to do it regularly over that short period, it really reinforced that lesson. And we know that, reinforcing these things means that they then linger in the long term.
Right. And then, after you've done it enough times, right, where you were kind of forced because the assignment said you have to do it for, you said 5 days, a month, whatever, that you have to go meet the new people and go strike up the conversation in the same way as like it being part of your job, right, as a journalist, being able to say like, well, I have to because the assignment says I have to go talk to someone. You can use that kind of excuse, but hopefully eventually it can become more of a habit as you start to see, okay, it's not as scary as I thought. And there was this value, like I made a new friend or brightened their day or mine, or got this new connection or weird good recipe, or like, something. You're getting the benefits that then it becomes something that you can just continue to do once you've done it enough to change that expectation.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And so there's a kind of twofold problem that we have, which is that we tend to underestimate how pleasurable these exchanges are going to be. So they often give us this real buzz afterwards. Like they just is an instant mood boost, but we don't tend to recognize that fact. And so by practicing it, you do come to expect the fact that you're going to feel good afterwards. You're not going to be kind of cringing for the rest of the day. But also, we overestimate how awkward it's going to be. And so with that kind of experiment, with that kind of process, you just very quickly realize that actually, it's not awkward. The other person they're going to be pretty pleased to talk to you as well. You might brighten up their day. At the very least, they're going to be polite to you.
Yeah. Well, I really loved, and it's woven throughout the messaging of the whole book, but also this feeling like the other person doesn't want to talk to us, right? That sort of, there's nothing special about me. If I they're not going to care that I like their hat, right? Like they don't want me to say that to them, or they don't want to hear this. They're going to think it's weird. They don't like me as much as I think they do or should. And I'm always questioning. I know there was a piece about roommates, I'm hoping that you'll bring up as the different like roommates in college, right? That you think that they don't like you as much as they do. But with all of that being an issue, knowing that like scientifically people like to hear about these things, right? Like, so can you share a little bit about, I guess, that other side of the equation that we tend to underestimate?
Yeah. And that's really important because, we often then can get quite good at these short-term interactions, but there is this phenomenon called the liking gap, which means that we do often, replay those interactions afterwards, and we start to doubt whether the other person really liked us. So it could be, we could have had a pleasant conversation that we found really positive, but we still might not feel that we could take it to the next level of friendship, because we just don't recognize how much how they felt about us. So there were these studies that, first of all, just looked at strangers who are meeting and talking for 5 minutes in those fairly superficial interactions, and you ask each person afterwards to rate how much they liked the other person and how much they thought the other person liked them. And you see this liking gap in that people always assume that they liked the other person more than the other person liked them. And it's kind of symmetrical in a way because the other person is feeling the same thing too. And you can see instantly how that is a big barrier to connection, because if you're both second guessing the other person, neither of you is likely to then want to kind of send that text message to arrange to meet up another time, or to build on that kind of nerve of rapport that you've got there. So, reading about the liking gap, I immediately saw that there were so many opportunities for forming friendships in the past, and I probably just hadn't seen them. They were kind of invisible to me, and just correcting that one bias, I could have actually made a lot more friends and, people who I really respected and admired. Sometimes I would even turn down an invitation from these people because I'd think, well, they're only asking me out of politeness. But, the research suggests they weren't. With these questionnaires, you ask them specifically, how much did you like that person? How much did you want to spend time with them? How much would you like to be their friend? And we're underestimating all of those different dimensions of friendship. So that's my second law of connection, is just to try to be a bit braver about, making that next call, or just go with the assumption that people probably do like you as much as you like them. And obviously we have to still be sensitive and polite, and if someone's giving us negative signals, to respect that, because this is only averages. Sometimes people won't have time to be friends with you, or they don't feel that you share enough interest. But the stats are on our side. That's how I always see it. The odds are stacked in our favor, that in most cases people probably do want to have some kind of friendship with you if you feel that the rapport was there, that the interaction was positive.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and thank you for, transitioning it into the, like you said, the second law of connection. I would guess it's this balance of like, is it reasonably easy to just give a summary of all of the laws, or when there are 13, do we get kind of, what's the best way to kind of jump in? Do you want to just share a few, or are you able to kind of rattle them off?
Yeah, I mean, I think it might take too long to do each of them justice, but I can certainly talk about some of my favorites.
Yeah, that's good.
And so the first law of connection is all about creating a shared reality. And this is, a shared reality is this strong sense that we might have that another person, is seeing the same world, seeing the world in the same way that we are. And that's not just about whether they have the same political beliefs or whether they're in the same demographic group as us, but it's really much deeper than that. Is, looking at whether their visceral reactions to events are similar to ours. So it could be, there are lots of signs of this, just in general conversation. If you find that you're finishing each other's sentences or saying the same thing at the same time, or that you laugh at exactly the same jokes. It might be that you're listening to a piece of music and you both get chills at the same point. Those are very profound experiences for us, social experiences, because they show us that the other person is fundamentally on the same wavelength as us. So, I was really then kind of gobsmacked and delighted to find that there's even these studies from neuroscience that show that there's a literal truth in this idea of being on the same wavelength. So you can scan people's brains as they watch different videos, like YouTube clips of like a documentary, a comedy video, a music video, and you can predict who's going to be friends with who by the similarities in their brain activity as they watch those clips, because the more similar their brain activity, the more likely it is that they are having this kind of shared reality when they interact. Now, the shared reality is sometimes there and sometimes isn't with people. You might just meet someone who is very different from you. They're seeing the world in a very different way. But there are ways, I think, that we can encourage the formation of this. And sometimes it is just a question of making sure that you validate the other person. So if they have said something that you agree with or that you're feeling, just make sure that you actually vocalize that you verbalize it, that you tell them that you did. Often we might just neglect to do so, and we're missing a big opportunity there. And then there are different activities we can do that can engineer a shared reality. So things like singing together, dancing together. What you can see is that those physical activities, those synchrony of the movements, it actually primes the brain to start acting synchronously as well. And you see as a consequence of that people do tend to start liking each other more. They start to feel that they have this kind of shared identity in some way. And that's, I think that we are maybe too ready sometimes to see the differences between ourselves and other people, but often you can find some experiences that you will share with that person, and to really focus on that is a good way of building rapport. And then you can talk about your differences, but you've already got this foundation there that shows that you do understand each other, or that you're striving to understand each other.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's a really great segue to kind of bring in the business side of the Brainy business, right? So if we think about being on a team, whether you're, new to a team, you're starting a new team in an organization, or you're just new into a group and not really sure kind of where to start. We think of all these things that on the surface you say like, oh, I hate that we have to do the team building exercises or the, trust falls or whatever it happens to be. But to show that, there is value in, one, the team liking each other is good for a whole lot of reasons of getting things done and whatnot. But, what advice do you have as people are looking at their teams and thinking about something like this?
Yeah, I mean, so first of all, like having good social connection within teams is incredibly important. And I think sometimes it is a fact that certain companies ignore. Like one of my friends went for an interview at a literary agency, and he was told, this is not the kind of company where we have water cooler chats. So he ultimately was offered the job but didn't accept it because that's not the kind of place you want to work. And the scientific studies really show us this. People who feel liked and supported by their colleagues are much less likely to suffer from conditions like burnout. And it's so important for predicting things like employee turnover. The social ties we have really do keep us rooted in a job. But like ice breaking, it can be a bit cringy, but there's absolutely a role for that. And there are lots of different ways we could do this. But given that we do know that those kind of synchronous movements are so important for creating that synchronized brain activity, one German publisher was involved in this study where the employees were just encouraged to do this kind of aerobic exercise in the morning. There was, rhythmic movements where everyone was acting in sync. And what they found was that it did increase the sense of social connection within the company. And, as a consequence of that, it then led to kind of less stress, fewer employee sick days, it had all of these benefits for business too. So there's absolutely a good business argument to be taking notice of this research and putting it into practice.
Yeah, definitely. So for everyone listening, like water cooler chat can be a positive thing. We don't need to spend all day over there.
Right.
But also, where they say people, research, people who have a best friend at work are much less likely to leave, than those who don't. So like you said, turnover, profitability, and just more efficiently, effectively getting things done and trust. Like so many good things come from having these positive connections across organizations. Yeah,
and creativity. I mean, what I think was most shocking about that company was that it's a creative agency. And there's so much research showing that creativity arises from the conversations that we have with other people. They naturally feed us ideas or new perspectives that we could then incorporate into our own work. They're a source of inspiration. And if you're just tied to your desk all day and you're not able to have those chats, 90% of those chats or 99% might not end up resulting in anything tangible. But, it's still worth it for that 1% of the time if it gives you that real inspiration that you needed to solve that problem.
Absolutely. And knowing that even if it doesn't have something that you can directly tie and say, oh, this conversation sparked this thing, it's ruminating in there. It's doing stuff, even if you don't, consciously realize it.
Yeah, exactly. I think we can, like you said, we can differentiate this from that kind of boisterous chat you might have in the office where people are not really focusing on their work at all. But I mean, to try to prevent any kind of conversations, it's the opposite of what a good workplace should be.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Well, thank you for bringing that back over to the business side. What's another of your favorite laws of connection?
Well, we spoke a little bit about this with the liking gap and how we underestimate how much people appreciate us. And the consequence of this is that we should be telling people how much we like them when we see them. And not only that, but, even when we have an established relationship, working relationship, friendship, romantic relationship, we should be much more expressive about what that person means to us, what we're grateful for, what we admire. There's such good research on compliment giving, by Nicholas Epley, by Vanessa Bonds, by other people, that shows that we tend to be too reluctant to pay out these compliments or to express gratitude. There are lots of reasons for this. Sometimes we just assume the other person kind of knows how great they are, so they don't need to hear it from us. We think we're going to be a bit cringeworthy when we say it. Like, we don't have trust in our own social skills to pay an elegant compliment. But the research shows, the other person, no, you definitely don't mind being reminded how great they are, even if they do suspect it. Hearing it one more time is always a pleasure. There was a study showing exactly that, even over the course of a week, when they ask someone to pay compliments to the same person each day for a week, the other person receiving the compliments did not get tired from hearing that. So it cements these relationships. It's pleasurable for the person receiving the compliments, but we actually feel pretty good ourselves when we tell someone how great they are. And there's this theory that paying compliments or expressing gratitude does three things. It helps to what was it? I can remember two, but not the bird, which is embarrassing.
Go through them. We say, well, two or three, and then you'll get the other one when you read the book, right?
Right, yeah, exactly. So the two that I can remember are, it binds us to people. It reminds us of who is valuable, and also it reminds other people when they hear us paying compliments, it reminds them of who's actually appreciating us, who's, invested in the relationship. And then the third one, I can't remember the word attached to it, but what you see is something called the witnessing effect, which is that actually find, bind, remind. That's it. Helps us to find friendships, binds us to the people when we pay the compliment, and it reminds ourselves of who's important and reminds the other person of who, is really paying attention to them. Now, the find part I find fascinating, because what you see is that if I pay you a compliment, Melina, what you would find is that even other people who are not directly complimented, they will like both of us more for the fact that we had that interaction. It will draw attention to them, all of your brilliant qualities, and it will show that I'm the kind of person who is appreciative and is a good connection to have. So you're actually much more likely to make new friends by complimenting one of your old friends in their presence. And that's something that we might avoid in business settings, I guess, because you might worry that the other employees are going to kind of get jealous if you compliment one employee on their work and you don't compliment everyone. But actually, the research suggests we're not really that thin-skinned. We get so jealous over something so small. It creates a really good working culture if you can express yourselves freely to show your gratitude and what you respect in other people.
What I like about that too is it allows for, I really like any opportunity in business, just in life, whatever, where you can have some sort of a process or a mental checklist of something, but it can feel spontaneous and surprising to other people. And it should be, right? But it's not like, I'm going to compliment, David on his shoes today, regardless of what they are. Like, that's not right.
Right.
Right? But if you say, like, I'm going to say one nice thing about, each employee on a, you say it's like weekly basis or whatever. But if you know that you're on the lookout, I'm going to be paying attention to what David is doing this week. And when I see something, I'm going to make sure to mention it. And I only have to do one. So I don't have to be like really way above and beyond. And, maybe other people are around, maybe they're not. But I know next week I'm going to be on the lookout for, Emily and what she's doing. And, but you then again, it kind of builds that habit. But as long as you don't say, I only ever compliment David and I ignore everyone else.
That is the problem. Yeah. And also, like you said, I think one of the barriers to paying compliments is that we're worried about, it seeming artificial. It's a bit like that character, Mr. Collins in Pride and Prejudice, who he's rehearsed these terrible, excruciating compliments that don't really bear much relation to the real world. And everyone can see that. And what that does make you look is kind of unctuous. It raises these fears that you're just manipulative. But the truth is that, most people aren't doing that. We actually have a lot of spontaneous, generous, thoughts that arise to us all the time. And we bite those down because we don't want to appear like Mr. Collins. But actually, if they are arising in the moment totally naturally, we should be saying them because the other person will appreciate us for that. And there are a couple of kind of good rules to follow when you're paying compliments, and they should be realistic. So don't try to kind of make up something that you think the other person wants to hear, but you don't believe it's true. And they should be specific. So, really try to look at what it was about the other person. What even one behavior demonstrated, not just in itself, but about the person's character as a whole. Those kinds of compliments are much more effective. So, I might thank you for helping me with, get out of this, kind of dead end with my project. Well, just saying that I appreciate the hard work you put in is one thing. But if I also then say, well, that was a really creative solution and I really appreciate how you're always there for me when I have these kinds of problems, making it clear that you see the person behind the action, that's a lot more effective.
Well, that reminded me of I love talking about questions. Questions are one of my very favorite things. And in the book, you talk about, 6 different types of questions. And when we, it was like watching speed daters and things. If they asked questions, you're more likely to get another date. And we like people that ask questions, but not every type of question has the same value. Can you share a little bit about questions?
Right. So I guess if we go back to that idea of shared reality, our conversations should be trying to dig beneath the surface to identify, to get to know the other person more profoundly, what is happening in their mental universe rather than just, the kind of vague details of the weather or where they live, so you want your questions to be specific. And to demonstrate to the other person that you're trying to do that work to get to know them at this deeper level. Now, a lot of people, when they ask questions, they just stay at them very superficial. So it will just be how are you? What did you do today? Which are fine, to kind of warm up. But if you leave it at that, you're not really showing much attention. So what does seem to shift the tone of the conversation and really have a big effect on things, like if someone is invited for a second date during speed dating, is whether you ask follow-up questions. So you've heard what the other person said, you're curious to know more, and then you ask something specific about that will allow them to expand on that. And again, I think this should arise spontaneously. We can build a habit so it will arise more spontaneously. But I do know some people who ask a lot of questions, but the questions, for some reason, always seem to be missing the point of what I'm trying to say. So it's almost like they have built this kind of rule as if it's like an algorithm, but they're not really thinking I want to understand that person. It would be focused on a very small, what I consider to be a very irrelevant detail, rather than getting I might say about a work project I'm talking about, and they would ask me something about the deadline. But what's really important for me is why am I passionate about that? What is interesting about it? How's it going to change my life knowing this new stuff? And so that's what we should be doing with our questions, really, is probing those kinds of details, working out what's animating the other person, why something matters to them personally. The kinds of questions that are especially bad, though, this term called boomer asking, which Ellison Woodbrooks came up with. And it's like a boomerang where you ask a question just so that it will come back around to you. So you might say, hey, Melina, how's work going? And you might, say one sentence and then you're like, well, anyway, my day was just amazing. Or my day was terrible. I had such a crisis. But you haven't shown any actual interest in the other person. It was just an excuse to be able to talk about yourself. And it's the least flattering thing to hear.
Yes, definitely don't want those. And they're more transparent than you think they'll be if you throw those
right
out there, right? Well, let me tell you about, that's great, but back to me. So
I think it'd be much better to just say, you'll never guess what, I was given a bonus today. Or I met this really cool person. Because actually, that's another rule of connection, is that we should be more open about the things that excite us. We don't have to kind of play modest. And people will respond well. Like if you're enthusiastic about something and you just go out and say it, people feel happy with you. It's this emotion called confelicity, which is like the vicarious joy you get at someone else's happiness. So we don't have to try these manipulative techniques like Boomer asking to try to kind of draw a veil over them or to pretend that, we didn't want to talk about them in the first place. We can just go ahead and say it openly, provided then that we do genuinely show interest in the other person as well when they have something similar that they want to share with us.
Yeah, I really appreciated the section in the book where you talk about that. You talk about humble bragging, right? And like we all like it's so clear and obvious. And the references to the different research for social media influencers and things where we all kind of the whole world is rolling their eyes, those sorts of moments. And so it's not, but you can avoid the humble brag by just actually, like you said, being excited. And if you reach out to the person and say, this amazing thing happened, and for some reason, I wanted to talk to you about it. Like I knew you would get it and I was excited and I thought you would be too. And yeah, hey, what's up with you? Right? Like you wanted to share, they can be excited and they feel good about it. I really appreciated too that in the book you talk about how like we feel like someone's not going to want to hear it, all of what we've been talking about already, or feels like I'm trying to rub it in, I'm just trying to brag, whatever. But actually, where if that person finds out that you didn't tell them and you told another friend, they may feel like they thought something about me. It can make them feel bad that you didn't bring it up.
Right. It's actually very insulting. And I've had personal experience with this when one of my friends, we were at university and she had got this amazing job offer and she only told half of our friends and I was on the other half of people. Obviously, I found out straight away from the other friends who'd already heard, and it just left me feeling like what was it that she thought? Why does she think I can't deal with this news? I'm just pleased for her. I don't need to have it hidden from me. And the research really bears that out. I mean, it does show it's just false modesty just never really works. It's never a good idea. We can brag quite openly if we're genuinely excited, just as long as what we say is, first of all, it has to be accurate again. Like lying in any case or any form of deception is always going to be alienating. And it often can help if we do talk a little about the challenges that we face. So this isn't kind of humble bragging where we're pretending something great is actually terrible, but it's more just when we're open about the fact that, we might have got this amazing job now, but we had quite a few rejections beforehand, or that the interview was really tough. It was quite grueling, but we still managed to get the job. Because that helps people to understand the whole narrative behind it. It actually helps them to understand why you're so excited, why it means so much to you. Whereas I think if we, as we often do on social media, we only talk about the good things without ever sharing the bad things. It's giving a very one-sided view. And on an individual basis, occasion by occasion, it might not be such a problem, but I think, over multiple interactions, then that can make you seem like someone who maybe is a bit self-absorbed and, full of themselves or overly proud.
Yeah, definitely. And this is just one of so many amazing pieces of advice throughout the book. I truly enjoyed it. Like we said, there are 13 laws of connection, right? So, and so much amazing research to back it up and really great stories like we heard today. So, of course, there will be a link in the show notes for everyone to go get their copy of Laws of Connection. For everyone, though, that's looking to, learn more and connect and follow you and all the things, what's their best path to do so?
So I'm now on Blue Sky. So you'll find me if you search for my name, I think. But it's David A. Robson at Blue Sky Social, or whatever. I still get. I find the avatar name is a little overly complicated. But yeah, you should be able to find me like that. And my Instagram account is the same, so David A. Robson, and I'm still on Twitter. The _A_Robson. My website is davidrobson.me, where I, give some updates, and you can find my portfolio. And I've also got a newsletter. If you search for the 60-second psychology Substack, I just started that in 2025. And I'm really excited about it, actually, because I often come across so many good studies that I want to share. And this is a way for me to just give very brief summaries of the things that are really exciting me.
Oh, awesome. I love that. Well, we'll definitely have, like I said, links in the show notes to make it easy for everyone. And just thank you again, David, for joining me today. I really enjoyed the book and loved sitting down to chat with you about it.
Thank you. Me too. It's been a real pleasure talking to you.
Thank you again to David Robson for joining me on the show today. What got your brain buzzing in today's conversation? For me, I really appreciate that David has put together some consistent laws people can use to enhance their connections. Whether we're shy or confident, introverted or extroverted, we can all build deeper relationships. The laws of connection goes beyond just stressing why that's important, but actually has tips for how to do it, which is so great. You don't have to do all of them, of course, and definitely not all at once. You can just pick one thing to start with and focus on. Maybe you want to be more open about your vulnerabilities, or to start trusting that others will like you as much as you like them, or to offer emotional support to those in need, or to check your assumptions, or to be more consistent in your treatment of others. There are so many great ways to enhance your relationships and connect more, and they're, of course, all outlined for you in the laws of connection. Which will you choose? Come share it with us on social media. You'll find me as the Brainy Biz pretty much everywhere, and as Melina Palmer on LinkedIn. And there are links to David's profile in the show notes as well to make it easy. You'll also find links to my top related past episodes and books, including The Laws of Connection and more. It's all waiting for you in the app you're listening to and at thebrainybusiness.com/483. And thank you again to David Robson for joining me on the show today. It was a delight to chat with and learn from you. Join me Tuesday for another brainy episode of the Brainy Business Podcast. It's going to be a lot of fun. You don't want to miss it. Until then, thanks again for listening and learning with me. And remember to be thoughtful.
Thank you for listening to the Brainy Business Podcast. Melina offers virtual strategy sessions, workshops, and other services to help businesses be more brain-friendly. For more free resources, visit thebrainybusiness.com.